All right, welcome back to another episode of the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by two guests this time. We have Dr. Christopher Mansour from Mercyhurst University, and we have Dr. Jordan Hutchinson from RFG Advisory. And the reason I wanted to bring both of these guys on is they are experts in this field from two different perspectives. Jordan, we're going to have you cover more of what financial firms do to protect the end client, and Chris will come at it from more of a everyday client perspective with his wealth of knowledge that he has as the chair of the cybersecurity department at Mercyhurst University. Before we do all that, I want to give them both an opportunity to introduce themselves because I'm sure I'm not doing it justice. Chris, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
So, hi, Alex. Thank you for having me. So, I'm the founding member and the chair of the Computing and Information Science Department at Mercyhurst University, which houses cutting-edge majors, including cybersecurity and data science. A little bit about my background. I studied engineering at Villanova University. I have my master's and PhD in engineering, and my research focused on next-generation network security. So it's how to design secure systems, what are the different security protocols needed, and things that we have to consider from an engineering perspective when it comes to cyber. And lately, I give a lot of advice in terms of cyber hygiene on the personal level or small to medium nonprofits or organizations, give some advice along those lines.
Okay, perfect. And for those of you that don't know, I am an alumni of Mercyhurst University. I did not have the pleasure of getting to know Chris when I was there. He started several years after I graduated, but it's always good to reconnect with someone from back at Mercyhurst. So thank you for being here. Jordan, we'll shift over to you. So you and I have talked a few more times in person. I'll let you do it. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Jordan.
No, happy to. No, and we have chatted a few times because we do work together on many things. But yeah, so Dr. Jordan Hutchinson, and my background, I started actually in the financial planning side of the business and got my master's in financial planning from University of Alabama, and started in the industry on that side, and then actually jumped into the product side. So designing product and developing financial services products. So all of the vendors and the financial planning software, all the softwares that financial advisors use is where I got into the business. And then actually started working more on the enterprise side. So I started working for some large organizations where I was supporting about 1,600 financial advisors nationwide, looking at all of their technology stacks, all the technology they use in their practice, but then also how do they handle things from like cyber, infrastructure, email, all these things that you forget about that you've got to have to run a business. And so that's what my role really entails at RFG now is. So I'm the VP of Technology and Operations. And so my teams, we have all the infrastructure from the endpoints of their email, all of that, to the cybersecurity side, to the technology that they would use with you as a client. So that the financial planning software, their CRM, all of those things. And then I teach adjunct for the Kaplan College, so the financial planning department.
Very nice. I didn't know you were teaching also. That's cool.
I teach a couple of classes we have ongoing. I teach for a certification that's around the human side of and the fintech side of financial planning. So minor elective courses in the College for Financial Planning. So Alex, you're a CFP, so the Certified Financial Planner. So my courses are electives for someone like yourself that are going through that program to get that designation, which is highly respected.
Got it. I love that.
And very difficult to get. So
it's a pain, but it's good once you have it. Being on the other side of it's nice. So we'll dive into, I have some questions to ask both of you, and hopefully we can keep this light and conversational. The goal here is to be helpful to our clients, of course. So this episode was inspired by somebody who unfortunately had an incident where their computer was hacked. And maybe I realized that I didn't know enough about cybersecurity to direct them in the right direction. Luckily, I had a lot of good support and were able to help them out and get them through that without anything super traumatic happening. But to lead us off, what do you each feel is the biggest risk facing maybe the end client right now when it comes to cybersecurity, specific to the financial world? So all your accounts that are out there. For this question, I'll start with you, Chris. What do you think is the biggest risk that clients face today?
Yeah, so the most significant risks that clients in finance sectors or investment sectors face is phishing attacks or phishing emails, which is a form of social engineering. These kind of attacks are basically designed to trick those individuals into providing sensitive information, including login credentials or some financial data, And the way they work is that they mimic legitimate communications coming from legitimate sources, even though the source isn't legitimate. And given the nature of the work that employees in the finance sector or clients in the finance sector do, they often have access to highly sensitive financial information. And this kind of information that they have access to makes them the prime target or the main target. And basically, social engineering and phishing in general can lead to substantial financial losses, including unauthorized access to different client portfolios and the reputational damage that they have as well. So it's a tricky situation, and they should be aware of those kind of attacks.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think my own observation over the past even 10 years or so is those phishing emails have become way more real looking. And I think 10 years ago, I could look at it and I'd say, obviously, that's not real.
Right.
Whatever financial firm would never send that out. You can tell the graphics aren't right. It's coming from this weird address. So, Jordan, what are some things we can do now that they look so much more real to differentiate between the real emails that we need to address and the phishing emails that we need to stay away from?
Well, I'll say that Chris is 100% correct in that, because I think the most recent research I saw earlier this year was it was like 96% of phishing attacks come from email. And so it's huge that they're coming through. And whenever, like I said earlier, one of our biggest things is managing that endpoint. And we have different filters and processes that we're going through on the front end, but I always tell people just to look at some of the key things, like the email. Is the email quirky and spelled something odd, or is it a weird email that you say that it's not a Gmail or a Yahoo or a domain that you're expecting that email from? So for me, RFG Advisory, is it from RFG Advisory? And I'll tell you a scary situation too that we experienced from the corporate side in a second, but look for those one-off things. And like you said, we actually caught a phishing attack where they changed the A to an alpha symbol, and it got so many people because that was so unique. You would have to look. The email was built perfectly. It was actually a DocuSign. And so it looked just like a real DocuSign that you would have received from someone like yourself or from our corporate office, that you're signing a form, which is really scary, but you've got to expect those things. And I always tell people to look for those one-off, and even if it's really good, call them. And there is the whole voice AI and stuff like that. But if you're making that phone call to Alex, to your team, just to confirm, hey, did you send this to me that I needed to sign? And if you said no, immediately report it, because in our infrastructure, we've got it where if you report it, now our system is going to read that so that if it was sent to other people within our tenant, it's going to be able to track them and automatically get rid of them as well.
Very nice. Who can, if a client wanted to report an email, how do they do that? They just tell us and we turn around and tell somebody else? Is there some email police system out there we need to know about?
Some mail clients usually have a report as phishing, and that goes to the backend AI system that basically learns from the behavior of the email or from the source or the origins of the email. There's a lot of things that goes into, or a lot of data points that goes into the AI or the machine learning system behind the scenes to classify those emails being phishing or not. Now, other organizations, and Jordan here can jump in, might have in the backend specialized systems, more particular threat detection, intrusion detection systems, or security incident and event monitoring systems that basically have different rules feeding into it and detecting those kind of things, depending on the backend. So if it's an email issued to you by a particular organization or a particular advisory group or something, they might have their own systems. But in general, any mail client, you can report phishing through a simple click in the email client itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So in your Gmail, you should have a button where you can click report.
Yep.
And it should, even if it's in there or wherever whatever email that you're using. But for the ones that, your clients, if they're working, that are using their work computer, and if they're in Outlook, Exchange, wherever, or if, they're in G Suite, all of those, they should have one built in there. If they don't, they should ask their technology department to make sure, or they should reach out to Chris and be like, he needs to come in and do some consulting work there. But I think that everywhere should have a location where you can report those things.
Okay, great. So as we mentioned before, things have evolved a lot in the last several decades. And in a lot of ways, email isn't that old of a thing. If you go back a generation, just wasn't an issue. So what do you two think are things that might evolve going forward? Like, where do you think all this sits in 5 or 10 years? Do you think the criminal always seems to stay one step ahead, or do you think we'll get to a point where all of this can be a lot safer and we can be more at ease? Jordan, I'll start with you for that one.
10 years sounds like an eternity. So I'll try to say 3 to 5. I'd say 3 to 5. I think that we've already seen significant increases of technology spend and cybersecurity spend, like all of these things that organizations, because it is happening and it's very scary because you never want to be in that department when something happens or if there's a breach and then now you've got to report it. Because like for us on the financial services side, and you being based in New York, or both of you are based in New York, but the New York Financial Services, they're actually farther ahead than the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, which regulates the policies and procedures. So I think that it's going to be required that there is more spend and more people focusing on it because it's just going to become a bigger problem. Am I going to want to be optimistic? I do. I think that there's going to be solutions. There's always going to be people thought the internet was going to be bad and full of drugs and other things, and that's all that people are going to be doing, like all the negative things. And the internet's been a beautiful thing to help out so many things. So I think that there is going to be a lot more positive down the road.
Okay. I like the optimistic perspective. That's good. Chris, what do you think?
So to piggyback of what Jordan said, first, a quick thing. We're in Western Pennsylvania, so close to New York State.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I'm sorry.
Just
I
to
thought
make
you were
sure, yeah, Western Pennsylvania. That's where Mercyhurst University is. But to piggyback from what Jordan said, I think the evolution of cyber in particular is rapid. So 10-year era is a lot of time to see a lot of things come and go. But it's a cat and mouse chase between the good actors, who are the people like us trying to build systems that are safe and secure to make sure that our identities aren't compromised, our businesses are safe, our information is safe from being targeted by nefarious actors. But at the same time, there are bad actors out there leveraging the same technology that we have, because it's all open source. We're learning the same thing, and they're creating more nefarious tools that can wreak havoc and steal a lot of information and cause a lot of information damage. Particularly now, depending, their focus shifts. So lately, their focus is on critical infrastructure. Tomorrow, their focus is on financial sector. Not that financial sector isn't critical infrastructure. What I meant by critical infrastructure, like more like power grids and more industrial systems. So depending on what the focus is and what's going on with the trending technology. And with the rise of AI, it's a double-edged sword. Bad actors have access to AI that's helping them automate different kind of attacks, creating different kinds of attacks. And at the same time, we, the good ones, are also leveraging AI and trying to see how we can use AI in different aspects. So there's no one answer to that question in a nutshell. Simply speaking, we're going to try to continue doing the good things, and they're going to try to abuse the technology. Like every technology, there are great things for it and the bad sides of it too. So it's a cat and mouse chase, and hopefully we'll always be winning at this point.
That'd be great. So another question that we get a lot, or one thing that I often think about, is there's these kind of insurance policies that are starting to rise up for identity theft protection. Some of the big ones are LifeLock, ID Seal. I'm sure there's dozens of other ones out there. Chris, can you talk a little bit about how those work? Are they worth pursuing, and where does that kind of go in the future?
Yeah, so products like LifeLock, ID Seal, they can be considered as valuable products for individuals who are seeking an additional layer of protection. So simply, these kind of services generally offer features like credit monitoring, alerts on different suspicious activities, and in the event of an identity theft, an assistance with funding for insurance, the right people, right team to assist you in recovering your identity and the information. LifeLock, for example, is a well-known identity service protection. They offer multiple plans, and I think they were bought by Norton. So it's like Norton LifeLock now. Norton has the antivirus application. ID Seal is relatively new in the industry. Back in 2018 is when they started. But regardless what kind of system you use, it's important to point to the listener's attention that these services cannot prevent identity theft entirely. They actually do provide tools that can help mitigate the damage and speed up the recovery process if an identity happens. It is worth the investment in terms of considering them, especially if you have substantial assets. But whether they are worth it depends on the personal situation of each client. So if you're at a high risk of identity theft and want a peace of mind, then it's worth the cost. But there are other low-cost alternatives that you can use to protect yourself. If you can simply be proactive about constantly checking your credit reports, setting up fraud alerts, and even practicing good cyber hygiene in terms of your online behavior and your online systems or the things that you use. So again, it's worth the investment if you want that extra peace of mind or extra layer of protection, but there are other alternatives as well. So depending on each personal case.
Okay. I want to come back to the alternatives in a minute. So we'll freeze right there. Jordan, you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree with all that. I love the phrase, the hygiene of how you're interacting on just on social media, things like that, or just on the internet and period. A lot of your internet service providers now will even offer where if you wanted to add a firewall for a couple bucks a month, it's not going to protect everything, but there's other little inexpensive ways that I think that they're trying to help. And so I think there's some interesting ways that like people can definitely find resources on it. Freezing your credit. If you don't plan on buying a car or any large expense, just going out and freezing it, because then it'll get automatically kicked back if someone's trying to do it. And like what Chris was saying on all those services, they have a way where you can monitor some of that. And that's that good hygiene of just keeping awareness of it, because it can happen and you not even know anything that's going on.
I like that. And freezing the credit was one that's come up in the past. So how does that work? And what are the downsides of doing that? To me, it sounds like you just basically turn off your social security number, for lack of a better term. But then when you go to purchase something, you got to flip it back on so you can buy that car or house. Yeah. Is that really the gist?
Okay. So yeah, basically freezing the credit simply is it's free, by the way. So anybody can go and utilize that service. I'm somebody who does that all the time. So basically you log into whichever credit bureau you want to follow, whether it's Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax, and you request a credit freeze. And what they do usually is this prevents creditors from accessing your credit report and makes it very difficult for identity thieves to basically create new credit accounts or open new accounts in general under your name. And you'll be alerted instantaneously. Like you get a message or an email telling you somebody is accessing your report. It's a very good thing and smart thing to do, but you have to also be aware that you need to unfreeze it if you want to go apply for any form of account. And I was a victim of that, in the sense where I had credit freeze and I went to Best Buy wanting to buy an iPad. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to pay up front. I'll apply for the Best Buy card. And I got denied, and it's stuck in that universe where you have to call to process it or not to call, whatever. I'll pay. I put in another credit card. But the point being is I forgot to unfreeze my account, and it clearly was detected. Same thing last time when one of the bankers wanted to increase my credit limit. Same thing. I had to unfreeze to get that processed. The moment it's processed, you freeze it back in. It takes like literally less than minutes to unfreeze and freeze. It's a good aspect to protect you from being victim of an identity theft, or particularly somebody trying to create an account on your behalf.
Okay. That sounds like a great option. And if I had to guess, when you went to Best Buy, you didn't really forget. You just wanted to test it and make sure it worked. So I'm glad to hear
yes,
that.
let's go with that. Let's go with that. That's better probably.
We had a corporate employee actually on our technology team that when they were coming on board, a lot of jobs and companies, especially in financial services, that require a background check, and you're working in finance, so they're going to run your credit and things like that. Well, she got denied and she panicked, and she was like, oh, I forgot that I have all of my credit frozen. So it looked like that she was having like an issue there, but immediately it solved. We ran again, it was completely fine. But that's exactly what he was mentioning. Make sure you keep track if you're going to do anything, because anything like that, purchases, it's gonna ding that.
But this is also a proof that they work. Like
For
this
sure.
clearly is an indicative that this credit freeze works well and in protecting you. So that's the very positive side of it.
Okay. I think if nothing else, it's an easy takeaway for everybody listening is look into the credit freeze, see if it makes sense for you, but it's an effective way of protecting your credit. I'd like to change paths a little bit. So a different kind of financial scam that seems to be becoming more abundant is the AI voice imitation. So for those of you that don't know what this is, it's effectively you getting a call from somebody that you think you know and love, and them saying, hey, I'm in a tough spot. I need $1,000. Can you send it to this address, or can you Venmo it, or whatever it might be? and the AI is getting to a point where they can very effectively mimic a voice, and it will sound like it's your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, whoever it is. What are your guys' thoughts on that? And what are some things we can do to protect ourselves? Jordan, I'll start with you for this one.
Yeah, I'll say that I know this situation very well because it actually happened to a close friend, and it was a phone call that went to his grandmother. And it was quite scary because a lot of times retirees are going to be the people that they're going to go after for these situations. And they called and were saying that they were in another country, they were needing this, and they were just in distress. And it got the grandmother, very worked up and very uncomfortable, scared. And it's one of those moments where it is scary that there's that ability out there. But I always tell people, and this is, some people think it's funny in some ways, but always have some way, like in those situations, to know that it is truly them. Like you can ask them a question, or some situations in financial firms, I know people have added like a code word to make sure that they're getting a phone call from the right people. It could be something as quirky as like blueberry pancakes. If that's your code word that's on file with your advisor, then they know that if there's a scam that you could say it. There's stuff like that I know that a lot of people have implemented. Or if it is a phone number that you can call them back, make sure you're calling back the number. So we have a lot of policies and procedures that we put in place. For example, a wire. If you're going to do a wire, you have to call and confirm certain things. We don't do anything without the first phone call, and we'll do double checks on certain things back and forth with it, because those things can be intercepted. I know that anyone that's purchased a house, that's a huge risk there of wiring it to the wrong place. And so an interception in that way. So it is very scary, but there's tons of policies and procedures that we put in place to try to mitigate that so that you're not stuck in that situation.
Yeah, I think having a sort of safe word is a good idea.
Yeah.
Talk that over with your friends and family and make sure you know who you're talking to. Chris, you have anything to add to that?
No, basically, Jordan described it all in the sense where if you receive a call requesting a particular financial transaction or a financial information, hang up and call yourself, call back that individual so that you are sure you're talking to the person you're calling, not like an AI deepfake or something along those lines. And of course, when you call a verified number, the number that you already know, not the number sent to you via email or randomly. But there's a lot of ways. The best thing we say also, trust nothing but verify everything. Don't trust but verify. And there's other forms of scams that come across here, not just through AI. Usually there's something known as the accidental deposit scam that we've seen sometimes. Basically, somebody gain access to a Zelle account or Cash App or PayPal account of a victim, and then transfers money to another victim, and then reaches out to the victim number two saying, I transferred you money by mistake. Can you return that money back to this account? And then that's how the malicious actor or the bad actor gets the money back. Again, those are different scams that are happening. Now here, granted, there was no voice AI, but there's more of trying to trick. It's always loop back to the social engineering aspect, tricking the victims of believing that this is a legitimate source who is placing this kind of request to gain access to accounts or get transactions or transfer money and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a tricky situation that we all have to be vigilant about when it happens.
Absolutely. Switching topics again, I've had some clients ask or people ask what they're trying to protect themselves. And I think that maybe by not signing in online to their accounts or not creating that online portal for their investment accounts, they're not putting the information out there. And I'm always skeptical of that. Does that actually add a layer of protection? Isn't their information still out there on these platforms anyway? Jordan, how does that work behind the scenes? And are clients protecting themselves by choosing not to sign up for online access or e-delivery for their documents?
Yeah, I think that I see where they're going of trying to, if I don't have an access point there, then they can't get in that form or fashion. I will say the one thing that we do to protect that so they don't have to worry about that, and what we actively monitor and protect, is what we call vendor risk management. So if they're on the custodian of Fidelity or Schwab, which are the places where those assets usually live, we have policies and we have documentation that we require, all the things that we run from a corporate side. So like when we talked about at the beginning, all those phishing attacks. So we run tests and are required by law to run those tests every quarter So Alex, you get fake ones sent to you from us that if you did click on, nothing would happen. You would be required to take some training, but report it. And we track all that data and we report on that data too. But we are required to do these things to just keep everyone aware. And the vendors that we work with, we require certain documentation from them to make sure that they're running these policies. And when we build our infrastructure, how we're monitoring it, we try to really keep everything tight so that we're not allowing an access point from somewhere else. For example, with you and your internet, we geolocate where our advisors are, so that if all of a sudden someone's trying to log in from Iceland and you didn't let us know that you would be visiting Iceland with your partner, then it's going to be automatically blocked. So we track and monitor and have a team that does that. Every single vendor we use, we require documentation from them that they're doing similar things, that they have all that reporting as well. So, and they have full teams to monitor all that stuff. So I get the fear of it and the goal that they're trying to do, but I think that as long as you're practicing it, you're working with a firm that has those resources, that you're going to be in a good place.
Okay, great. Chris, anything to add there?
No, that's actually right. So what he described, there's a lot of things that on the back end gets to be implemented between vendors and between the service provider as well. So from geolocation tagging to like automatic timeout, logout, you can't stay signed in for 25 minutes, right? Without doing anything. And a warning pops up saying you're going to be signed out. If you're coming from different places, they lock until you call and verify that it's you. A lot of things behind the scenes for access control, identity and access management, all of those things happen through the vendor.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Sort of one follow-up to maybe a similar question, but we have run into some people that maybe don't like DocuSign, and they think that they're maybe protecting themselves by choosing to do everything the old-fashioned way, using paper documents and wet signatures. Do you feel that DocuSign is putting clients at a higher risk, or is it actually maybe safer in a way?
So basically, I'm just going to talk about from a sense where I've used DocuSign twice or three times. Somebody had sent me some documents that I had to sign. I think if it is a known service, there is cryptographic algorithms and encryption behind the scenes to verify the signature that you're signing and to make sure that documents are delivered safely to you, end-to-end encrypted or things along those lines. Again, I'm not familiar with the system itself. I've only used it multiple times. I've used it and I've signed documents through it. And I believe that it has cryptographic systems behind the scenes that protect the information and the integrity of the information being transferred between the source and the receiver. But outside of that, I'm not sure if Jordan have any inputs there.
Yeah, I think that it's a great piece of technology. We use it quite frequently because it streamlines a lot of processes of opening up accounts, signing for certain things for an investment changes, all those things, and providing the documentation for you. Putting it on like what we call wet signature can be laborious. And anyone's purchased a car or home, you find out real quick that you feel like you're signing away your firstborn or something. Like, it's quite lengthy, and it's definitely streamlines that process. DocuSign is, I would assume, and from like our vendor relationship with them, they are always actively doing that. And every time that we do another training with them or integrate them into our system, we see the audit trails of everything. And so if there is somehow that some issues happen, it is a prime example of where a lot of people use fake DocuSign for phishing scams. But I don't think that it's anything huge to be fearful of if you're expecting that recipient. If you get just an out of the blue DocuSign, immediately report it. But if you're expecting it and it says that it's coming from 6 Point, then I think that you're in a good place. Always as Chris said, trust but verify. You're verifying that it came from who you're expecting it from. But if you get a random one, then get rid of it.
And I would assume also, not again, I'm not 100% sure because I don't work with DocuSign or know anything about their systems. But in general, services like DocuSign usually operate as if they are constantly under attack, in the sense where they are working in a way where they're always responding, even though technically there's no attacks, in the sense where their levels of security are up, They're always monitoring, they're always following every possible logs, checking the logs, auditing, all of those things. So I would assume services like that can be trusted for the purposes they're delivering. But again, I'm not familiar with what they're doing actually, and I'm not saying that they're doing or not. I'm just clarifying or assuming services like DocuSign could be doing this, and if they are, then they are something you can trust.
Very good. So we're ending up, or we're getting to the end of our time here. So I want to throw one more question at both of you. And that is, what is the next step? So let's say the God forbid scenario unfolds. I do get hacked, or I have a reason to think my information is compromised. Who do I call for that? What's the next thing I should do? Chris, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so first, there's immediate priorities that you have to look for if you are a victim, God forbid. For example, you start first by trying to contain the damage quickly by simply immediately the basic things is changing your passwords on all the accounts that you think may be affected, starting with your most important ones like email, work email, bank accounts, and then gradually going down to the less. I'm not worried about my Netflix account if my work email is being a victim, right? And of course, when you're changing those passwords, definitely use unique, long, strong passwords and enable two-factor authentication anytime you can. And if you're suspecting a form of a ransomware where something is encrypting your information, immediately disconnect the device from any other devices in the network, or if you're at work, disconnected, because simply speaking, the ransomware or the malware can spread from one device to another across the network. And then assess the situation. What is the information that was compromised? Did they access your email? Did they access your financial accounts, social media? And are there any signs of ongoing activity or unusual changes or messages sent from your accounts or things like that? Now, if it is a hack, contact, of course, if you're at a company, contact your IT services. Hey, I think I'm being hacked. What's going on? Help me out, figure out those things. And finance, if your financial accounts are being hacked, you can contact your bank or contact your financial advisor or the service that you're using, and obviously report fraud and freeze your accounts. This will help prevent any unauthorized changes. And if you think your identity is being stolen, the first thing you do is to inform the authorities. Mainly for identity theft, you can go to the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, and they can help you file an identity theft. You can state that you're a victim of identity theft, and they have a lot of guidance and create a recovery plan for you to recover. And of course, inform the authorities when it comes to other hacks like the police or the FBI. They can immediately also jump in to investigate of what's going on. I know, a matter of fact, there's a lot of advisors that are there to help people, especially when they're under attack, from the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency to the FBI. They work together. They have a lot of services together. And obviously, the basic thing for any financial case, place a fraud alert and credit freeze. This stops anybody from trying to open new accounts, and everybody is alerted that you may be a victim. And don't panic. That's the most important thing. Don't panic. You're not the first one. Everybody, God forbid, at some point may fall a victim. So just don't panic. Just be responsible and act accordingly to limit the damage. And then you can recover moving onwards.
Okay, that sounds easy.
It sounds like it, but yeah, a lot of process.
I think Chris, like, he laid it out perfectly. And I think don't be fearful of some of those, what we call multi-factor authentication or something of that, where you're having to do a second step for certain things. And don't be afraid to, if you see a fraudulent charge on your credit card, I always recommend people add all the alerts. So like you can add an alert that literally every time your credit card is swiped. And a lot of these services have it where you can immediately go in and freeze that card and then report that expense. And then they will do some checks on, like, through their system to see, is this something that is actually a risk, or is this a real vendor, or did someone use your card but wasn't present at this location of something? So I know that when there was a breach in a certain telecoms company, it was the phone service I use, I started having some weird things happen. I actually had to get a new credit card, a new Amex, and they were amazing about it because I started getting some fraudulent charges. And what's crazy is it wasn't big. It started off very small. And a lot of times that's what they'll do, is they'll to see like where they can go. And then it happens quick. But it happened actually at 11 o'clock at night. I froze my card. I reported it, and then they said this has been reported as fraud. I just requested a new card immediately, and things got better. I think that unfortunate that happens to people quite frequently, but I think we all have to follow the process, as Chris said, and then just be vigilant, like track those alerts. I love the phrase Chris used, hygiene of it. Like having that good hygiene for it is something we just have to move forward with, just in the world we are.
Also document everything you've done for later, for if you have insurance purposes, that you've done the necessary things, or like documentation always helps to see if there's a step missing. And then at the end, lessons learned. That's important. You learn a lot by doing so.
You definitely learned a lot, and I've learned a lot today. So thank you both. I appreciate your time coming on. Thank you to our listeners. This has been the Roadmap to Retirement podcast, and we'll wrap it up there. Thank you both.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Disclosure. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Alexander Neri. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Alexander Neri or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Alexander Neri and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.